The transmission shafts. Let me grab sprocket secondary shaft, I call it. Kind of hard to tell there, but you want to fit your two shift forks into the gears. And then make sure the bearing is in the C-clip, and again you want to make sure the hole in this bushing is sit down on the pin so it doesn't push the pin in, so it's locked. Another thing on these transmissions is actually part of the shimming process are these bushings. Now these are asymmetrical, so it's basically from this hole it's shorter to this side than to this side. The easiest way to remember this is the little slots in the side here are actually to let oil into the transmission, since most of the oil's inside here. You just want to place that in there. I've already shimmed the transmission, so I didn't do a video of that. So I sent this gear set out to Mark at R&D. He does all my transmission work. He cleaned it up, he magnafluxed the gears, bead blasted them so they look nice and new, made sure there weren't any cracks, and then he undercut the windows inside the gear, and he undercut the dogs on this gear also. So I found a really nice used fork. Their very first gear forks are very difficult to find these days, so be aware of that they're not easy to find. So we've got that, and so two shift forks in there, make sure they're aligned. This is correct with the cutouts here, not too much play here. The pin in the bushing here, and the C-clip installed and inside the bushing there. Now next we get to the I call it the clutch shaft, primary. So as you can see, it also has the cutouts for the bushing, in the bushing, outer bushing, bearing shell that goes in towards the shim, so oil can actually get into the bearing there. You've got your C-clip here, or half C. So just dropping this in. You also want to make sure that shift fork slips right in the gear there. The C-clip fits in there. You've got your cutout here on the inside, and you roll around till it drops in. Okay, so now you have both shafts installed. Next you'll see this is the support. It's also pinned. This is support for the clutch through rod, so that will go follow that in, and then you have the seal. I showed you how to do that with the if you want to go with late model ball bearing pusher. Oil the seal, also oil inside of this, of the support. Pop that down in, and I usually install the adjuster mechanism in after everything's together. You can do it either way, it's not a big deal. So but that's basically how it's set up. Now before I drop the top case on, I want to make sure this seal is square and flush. All the pins are still in. And as far as a lot of guys have asked about shimming a transmission, since I've already done it, I can just do an overview. There's a real nice thread on transmission shimming, and I'll go ahead and put that on the video, at least the address for that thread. Basically what you can do is take just a Phillips on the into the shift drum, and you can turn it and see how everything meshes up nicely. You can see how first gear is pulled in for the drive. You can watch, it's hard to tell on the video, but you can see you're getting a really nice depth into first gear there. And This gear has also been undercut because there was a little bit of damage there, and undercutting is good for all gears. Everything else here in the transmission was in nice shape, and so we just undercut first gear. But I usually recommend getting all the gears undercut just to take the load off the forks and have a smoother working transmission. So, and just run through. That was first gear. First gear comes out, wanting to go into second gear, which is here, so you might want to turn it a bit till everything lines up. That goes into second gear. That shows a nice deep engagement. So then you can go run it back. Have to realign it. That runs into third gear. You can see you have good depth engagement there. Basically, your shimming, since this is just held on by the fork, there's nothing you can do here as far as the movement there other than have a new shift fork. So your shimming will come into this part, how much depth you have here. So basically there's very little movement there. You've got deep engagement, so that's fine on that. And then you go into third gear. That comes in nice and tight. Just a little bit of movement. It needs to be loose just for expansion. A little bit. You could try to put a 1/2 millimeter shim in there, but then it'd probably be a little bit too tight. So, but everything looks good here. You get decent engagement here. Really good engagement there on the gear dogs. So third's nice. That moves back. You go into fourth gear. Again, this is your slider gear, so you're going to have some play in there because of the clearance of the fork. But you can see where you have nice deep engagement in between the gear dogs there. And not a lot of movement here, so basically what your shimming does is keep everything tight. You just want to have a bit of clearance in there so it's not dragging, and there is room for expansion there in the transmission. Fourth gear, and then you go slide, line it up, and then you go into fifth gear. That's fifth gear. Nice and tight. Nice deep engagement on that. So this is how a transmission basically should look, running it through the gears. As far as shimming goes, like I said, basically all it is doing is you've got your floating gears and you have your shaft gears, and so you don't want too much play in there, just enough for expansion. Like I said, I'll put up the URL for the breakdown with it. There's a lot of good photos and exactly how to do it and what to do, and so it might look a little bit daunting, but the main thing is if you do take everything apart, you can measure up everything. If you feel like there's too much play in it, you can take a feeler gauge. The shims come in 1 millimeter and 1/2 millimeter, so you can actually take a feeler gauge, slip it into where the shims go. You can see some here. Slip it in where the shim goes, slip it in, see if it makes it too tight. If it doesn't make it too tight, then you can either add a 1/2 millimeter shim or a millimeter shim. And you're basically looking for a nice good deep engagement and basically just as little clearance as possible there. Again, for the guys that don't know, these are called shift dogs, and when you do shift, these interlock and for each gear ratio, so that's how you get your different gear ratios there. So basically that's it. Before I bolt everything up for good, I'll lube the bearings and put a nice pour a little oil in the transmission, make sure the gears are all nice and wet, and the kickstarter and the shift drum too, so it's all nice and wet there.